Sex, porn, love addiction is all about self-soothing to manage your emotions. It got set up back in the childhood development years. It's just not about sex, it's not about porn. It's all about the repeated use has set up the physiology to crave those dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, self-manufactured drugs in the body. It's impacting women, men, children aged 10 to 75 across all the age ranges, the sexes, the cultures, the professions. It increased exponentially during COVID lockdown and impacting so many lives. The Kairos Center has created the first online comprehensive sex, porn, love addiction. It's a video on demand recovery program which you can access from anywhere in the world and begin to see identifiable changes just within 6 weeks of beginning this weekly program. Kairos means your appointed time. Isn't it your time to reclaim your life? Bring colour back to life without shame. Click the link below and begin your journey. You owe it to yourself and to others. Next part of the article is called pleasure principle. So the brain registers all pleasures in the same way, whether they originate from a psychoactive drug, a monetary reward, a sexual encounter, or a satisfying meal. A satisfying meal, a fairground ride, all of those actually play a part in secreting those biochemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. The feel-good drugs. In the brain, pleasure has a distinct signature. The release of the neurotransmitter dopamine into something called the Nucleus Accumbens part of the brain, a cluster of nerve cells lying underneath the cerebral cortex. Dopamine released into the nucleus accumbens is so consistently tied with pleasure that neuroscientists refer to the region as the brain's pleasure center. All drugs of abuse, from nicotine to heroin, cause a particularly powerful surge of dopamine into the nucleus accumbens. The likelihood that the use of a drug or participation in a rewarding activity will lead to addiction is directly linked to the speed with which it promotes the dopamine release, the intensity of that release, and the reliability, consistency of that release. That is setting the individual up for how and when and how quickly they will become addicted. It's about the speed in which the dopamine gets released and secreted into the body. Even taking the same drug through a different method of administration can influence how likely it is to lead to an addiction. Smoking a drug or injecting it intravenously as opposed to swallowing it like a pill, for example, generally produces a stronger dopamine signature and is more likely to lead to drug misuse. Addictive drugs produce a shortcut to the brain's reward system by flooding the nucleus accumbens with dopamine. The hippocampus, another part of the brain that you're going to come across in the diagrams, illustrations that I'll give to you, the hippocampus lays down memories of this rapid sense of satisfaction. It remembers. And the amygdala creates a conditioned response to certain stimuli. Conditioned, it remembers and wants to repeat. There's something about the learning process. Let me read you what is said here about the learning process. Scientists once believed that the experience of pleasure alone was enough to prompt people to continue seeking an addictive substance or activity, but more recent research suggests that the situation is more complicated than that. Dopamine not only contributes to the experience of pleasure, but also plays a role in learning and memory, two key elements in the transition from liking something to becoming addicted to it. According to the current theory about addiction, dopamine interacts with another neurotransmitter, glutamate, to take over the brain's system of reward-related learning. This system has an important role in sustaining life because it links activities needed for human survival, such as eating and sex, with pleasure and reward. The reward circuit in the brain includes areas involved with motivation and memory, as well as with pleasure. Addictive substances and behaviours stimulate the same circuit and then overload it. Repeated exposure to an addictive substance or behaviour causes nerve cells in the Nucleus Accumbens and the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain involved in planning and executing tasks. It allows that to communicate in a way that couples liking something with wanting it, in turn driving you to go after it again repeatedly. And it's that process which motivates us to take action, to seek out the source of pleasure, to repeatedly seek out that source of pleasure. This next section is talking about development of tolerance, how that gets set up. So over time, the brain adapts in a way that actually makes the sought-after substance or activity less pleasurable. In nature, rewards usually come only with time and effort. Addictive drugs and behaviours provide a shortcut, a quick fix, a flood in the brain with dopamine and other neurotransmitters, and our brains do not have an easy way to withstand the onslaught. It's not the way it should have been done. There tends to be a perseverance and then a reward. With the drugs, it's an immediate reward without too much work to achieve it. It floods and overloads the brain. Addictive drugs, for example, can release 2 to 10 times the amount of dopamine that the natural reward systems in the brain can do. And they do it more quickly and more reliably. Can you see why you're going to gravitate to the quick fix, to the quick reward, to the quick high experience? In a person who becomes addicted, brain receptors become overwhelmed. The brain responds by producing less dopamine or eliminating dopamine receptors, an adaptation similar to turning the volume down on the loudspeaker. When the noise becomes too loud, it turns it down. As a result of the adaptation that the brain is doing to help you, the dopamine has less impact on the brain's reward center. So you're not getting the same high as you used to get. The brain is trying to help you. People who develop an addiction typically find that in time, the desired substance no longer gives them as much pleasure. They have to take more of it to obtain the same dopamine high because their brains have adapted, an effect known as tolerance.